Welcome to episode 3 of Beyond the Big Sky. I'm Chad Shear and Wyatt Shear.
And we also have some special guests, Mr. Dudley McGarity with CVA, Bergara, BPI, and Mr. Dan LaFound.
And these two gentlemen have been icons in the outdoor industry for many years. Was I say enough minis?
A lot of minis. Enough, Chad.
Dudley started out at CVA in the 90s as a national sales manager and later on became the CEO of all the brands, and he'll get into that. And then Dan LaFound was Schuler LaFound, one of the larger sales reps across the country. He went through the whole process and the whole stage over the years, and he repped many brands like CVA and Under Armour and a lot of the outdoor industry's big brands. So we're going to get into that, but we're excited about this episode and excited to hear some of the history of it, but then also some of the trends you saw over the years.
So, I know you were with BPI from the get-go. How did that all evolve and how did it start?
Right. Well, actually, I started in 1995 with Connecticut Valley Arms, CVA, which was then an actual company. In 1999, that was bought up. The CVA brand was bought by a company named Black Powder Products, Inc., which is where BPI came from. But the CVA brand gave us the foundation upon which we built a multi-brand company, meaning that we had an organization there, but that organization owned several different brands to appeal to different segments of the outdoor market.
Now, one of the things with that, Dudley, is so that the people listening to this podcast can become familiar, what are the brands of BPI?
Okay, the brands are CVA, and I'm just going to mention them in sort of the order that they were developed. CVA, Power Belt, Bergara, Duracite, and Quake Products, which makes the famous Quake Claw Sling, which is the most popular rifle sling in the United States.
Absolutely. Dan, when did you start repping those brands?
I was with CVA for about 30 years.
Wow.
I started about 5 years before Dudley. I was with a rep group, Pro Sports, out of Chicago, and had repped for them for about 10 years, and then went into partnerships with Robert Schuler. It became Schuler LaFound and Associates, and we repped them till I retired.
Wow.
About 4 years ago. So, yeah, it's been a brand that's been part of my life and really helped grow the rest of our agency, for 30 some years. Bob and I were together, Robert Schuler and I were together for about 20 years. And CVA was a mainstay. I mean, it was basically the foundation of our agency. So they were always a solid company for us.
So, Dudley, you started in where CVA was just selling muzzleloaders.
Correct.
And at the time, let's talk about what muzzle. I mean, so many people grew up with the kit guns, and you talk about the fathers and the sons, or father's daughter, sitting there building this kit gun, and that was
Exactly.
a popular thing for CVA. But then it goes from there to where it is today.
Right. Well, CVA was born purely as a muzzleloading company, and traditional style muzzleloaders, meaning side locks, cap lock, and flintlock rifles, back in 1971. And so in the 70s was when the whole muzzleloading hobby sport took off. States started opening seasons so that you could expand your hunting season by hunting during the muzzleloader season. And back then, the big thing was you'd buy a kit, and a father and son, as you mentioned, would then put that gun together, finish it out, and hopefully go out and kill a deer with it, which was a pretty phenomenal thing. And I remember doing that with my father back in the day. And so that was what sparked my interest in muzzleloading. And then later on, back in 1995, when I got the opportunity to go and work for CVA, the company, I thought, what could be better than that? To get to work for a muzzleloading company and get to hunt in a lot of good places. And so that was the beginning of what turned out to be a very long and exciting career. And we were able to take that company, that one little muzzle loading brand, expand that once we converted to BPI. And now, as you know, with Bergara, we're also one of the top center fire rifle companies in the United States.
So how did that all transit? I know how it happened because I was fortunate to be there. But for the people listening today, how did that come about? Well, first off, you went in CVA. You started with, you had the side locks, and then you went into the bolt action muzzle loaders,
Right.
with the old
Inline
buckhorn,
type,
the
yeah.
inlines. Yep.
Well, everything went to inline. A man by the name of Tony Knight with the Knight rifle sort of pioneered making the inline the next step. And the thing about inlines is they were functionally superior to the side lock guns because the ignition was faster, because the ignition source, the primer, was directly in line with the powder charge, meaning it was right behind the powder charge. So that started a major revolution, what we call a disruptive innovation in the muzzleloading industry. And the entire industry changed over from what we call a traditional muzzleloader, side lock, over to what we call a modern muzzleloader, which would be the inline. And so what's happened is, over the years, the technology in inline rifles has just continued to improve and improve and improve. And with those improvements, people keep upgrading their guns.
Right.
Which is important from a business standpoint because, as you know, if you take care of a gun, it'll last you the rest of your life. So you have to give people a reason to buy a new gun.
Yeah.
So we've gone through all sorts of technical innovations, all the way down to where now we have the Paramount, which is sort of, well, it's the Paramount technical innovation, which is a muzzle loader that you can actually shoot accurately and effectively at 400 yards and beyond.
Wow. Now, Dan, you went through all of this. You were selling.
I went through the good, the bad, the ugly.
Exactly.
Okay.
What was that like?
Well,
back
it was
then?
it was trying at times, right? When the early years of CVA, when we repped them, and Dudley had mentioned the kits, and it really did bring a lot of people, into the hunting, into the hobby of it, and whatnot. It was not only hunting; there was leagues and everything. Guys go out and shoot and do all that sort of thing, but. The inline, when the inline came in, all of those thousands, and I mean it's thousands and thousands of muzzleloaders that we sold in those early years, you would wonder who in the world needs another muzzleloader, right? So to Dudley's point, it was always, what CVA was really good at was innovating, always innovating, and you had to move guns, right? To give them a reason to buy guns. And we made some really good side locks. We were really known for an accuracy gun. They really made their barrels well. And the gun shot extremely well. But we were always trying to improve those guns. And, you got to look at the business end of it. You're always trying to make money, right? So there were some early years there that we had, at times some issues and whatnot, and they worked through all those things and became really a much better company because of it, right? They pressed through there, and really, and if you look at the guns that they have today, they're pretty amazing. Not only the accuracy there, but the reliability of those guns today. There's not many people making muzzleloaders today.
Right.
But the ones that are, you can put a CVA up against any of them.
Yeah.
And just because of the work that they put into them and the technology, and spent a tremendous amount of money to get where they are today, it's a fine firearm.
It is the investment they did, and they didn't just settle. Okay, we've got it here. They're constantly innovating. Now, Wyatt, I got thinking about this. All this was happening before you were even born.
Way before my time.
Before your
I don't even think I've ever shot one that old.
However, what I thought was so cool is, while we're talking about this, I fast forward. You were born in 2002, and just around that time, CVA came into the centerfire world. And Wyatt, what did you You remember that old CVA Optima
CVA
Elite?
Optima Elite 223 is what I shot my first deer with.
Your first deer? What else? Down in
Pigs,
Texas.
turkeys.
Pigs, turkeys. That little 223, it put to the test, but was a transition. Dudley, let's talk a little bit about entering that world. And I mean, I want to fast forward to the Cascades because that's so awesome. But let's talk about that.
2002 was a watershed year for BPI with the CVA brand, because that was the year that we introduced the Optima. Mm-hmm. And the Optima was a break action rifle, which was in a price point that people could afford. And the advantage of break actions is they were easier to prime, easier to clean than were the bolt action or spring loaded action type guns that were very popular before that. That sparked a whole nother turnover in the market. So everybody that had one of the original style inline rifles had to have a break action. Mm-hmm. So essentially the whole market turned over. And we were a little bit ahead of our other middle price point competition there. And that rifle, the Optima, catapulted us into a first place position in the muzzleloading industry, and we've never given that position up.
Absolutely. And you also, besides that, then you were smart enough with the innovation to have the Wolf, which was an entry-level gun back then, sold for $150.
$99 at some point.
Outbreak action.
No, you're right. The lowest the Wolf ever was $149. Back then, inexpensive guns were a big part of the muzzleloading industry because people were just getting into it. They were just getting seasons. Those seasons were short. They didn't want to spend a lot of money on a muzzleloader. As things have progressed, people have started spending more and more on the muzzleloader as the technology has improved. But I mentioned before that Optima muzzleloader, having that break action platform allowed us to get into single shot centerfire rifles. Mm-hmm. So we expanded that out and developed a whole line of both interchangeable barrels where you could change the caliber centerfire to muzzleloader. So you had one action with all that capability there. And then eventually down the road, we made the move from just single shot break action centerfires and moved into bolt action rifles just a few years ago.
Which I thought they were absolutely, at the time, crazy, right? I'm thinking, another bolt action rifle. Does the industry need another bolt action rifle, right? And I was at first thinking, man, how in the heck are we going to sell these against the major brands that are out there? I mean, CVA is going to make a rifle, right? So it was a transition that I thought we were going to struggle with, and this thing took off like none other.
And for CVA, that transition was helped along, and during the meantime, we developed the Bergara brand, which sprung from our barrel business, which we had been for years. Actually, in about 2006, we decided to invest in a major barrel making facility in Spain. And that allowed us to expand into making centerfire barrels for other manufacturers. So we became very well known within the industry, Bergara Barrels, as a supplier of highly accurate barrels to major manufacturers all over the world. And that set the stage for the Bergara rifle, gave us all the experience that we needed in the bolt action. And then, as Dan said, couple of years after that, we expanded and offered a middle price point bolt action for the CVA brand.
And I remember back in the day, because being the director of advertising media relations for CVA, Dudley and I traveled all over talking to NRA editorial staff, the Outdoor Life, the Field and Stream, the Peterson's Hunting. We spend this time, and one of his lines was this: if you name 10 of the leading gun manufacturers in the industry, probably 5 of them are going to have Bergaras. And that was back when we just started going. And the other thing that was so cool is on the upper level CVAs at the time, you had that Bergara barrel stamped on it.
And we still do. The first place we ever actually marketed a Bergara barrel under its name was in the CVA upper end rifles.
Yep.
So those rifles featured the custom quality Bergara barrel.
Yep.
And we made barrels to fit Remington 700s, to fit Savage 110. We made replacement barrels for the TC Encore. So people knew who we were. Even, consumers in the know knew what Bergara was even before we launched the first Bergara rifle. But that gave us the platform and the credibility to jump into the rifle building business with Bergara. And then, Chad, I think you were with me when we went to the Marine Corps Special Weapons Section at Quantico, Virginia.
Yep.
And we met a man there by the name of Dan Hannes, who was the chief instructor of the Special Weapons Section there. So they built all of the sniper rifles for the Marine Corps. And he was about to retire. And we recruited him out of the Marine Corps to come work for us to help us build these Bergara custom rifles. And that was our entree into the rifle market, was very expensive, high-end custom rifles built by Dan Hannes and the team that he recruited from the Marine Corps. So we had the same guys that were building the precision rifles for our Marine Corps snipers all over the world were building rifles for our Bergara custom customers. And that launched the Bergara brand.
And I remember that. We had Mark Hendricks with us, who Mark actually had met Dan at a job fair at Brownells.
Right.
And just started this dialogue. And I'll tell you, Dudley was smart enough to pick up on this and go, you know what? We need to have good people. We need to go and find the right ones. And he listened to Mark, and Mark was like, hey, this guy's really sharp. And today Dan still works for us.
Yes, he does. And so does Mark.
Yeah.
And, that's one other cool thing about our company is almost everybody that's ever worked with us at a high level position is still with us.
Yeah. It was great, unless they retire.
Yeah, early on, Dan was building, when you guys first started building those rifles, what really laid the foundation was you built quite a few rifles for law enforcement. And it was because of the accuracy, because you had to go in and test against all the brands. And you won a lot of those contracts because of the accuracy.
That's
that
right.
really set the stage.
Yeah, and one of the first police forces that we recruited was the Atlanta Police Force. And our headquarters is in Lawrenceville, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta. And we had some connections with the SWAT team there in Atlanta. And I remember taking all the guns down when we were brand new. And of course, they were getting recruited by all the big names. And we actually worked with these guys to build custom sniper rifles to their specs. And the APD is still one of our best law enforcement customers today. So we've got all these, just like we do with our retail, our retail partners. I mean, these relationships go back 25, 30 years.
Now think how shocking that was for this, basically a non-brand. We were a non-brand at the time. If you think about it, in that world, to come up against all of the majors and to win those contracts, right? So that's a huge statement.
Well, and key to that was our gunsmiths, that we recruited these guys out of the Marine Corps. So we had the reputation for Bergara barrels, for the accuracy, for supplying barrels to all these other major companies, major gun companies in the world. Then add on top of that the credibility and the gravitas you get from having Marine Corps sniper rifle builders on your staff.
Well, when you think about, a hunter today wants accuracy. But when you think about a SWAT team, you're talking about sometimes squeezing rounds within, a couple inches. So you don't hurt the good people, right? So, it's just amazing. And again, I'll say it. I mean, it really set the stage for the credibility of the accuracy of those guns. And I think that's what set us up really more than anything was who was building those guns.
And that really was only 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And now you can go into virtually any hunting, shooting store in the country, and you'll see Bergara rifles on their rack.
Right.
Now I want to go back to something real quick. You were talking about the Optima platform and how that set precedence. Wyatt, I want to go back. You grew up shooting with CVA and Bergara. Tell me about your Kansas whitetail hunt when you were down there with Mr. Gene Piercy. You were, what, 10 years old, I think?
Was. And then that was with Optima V2, I believe.
Yep.
And it was, I had a 164-inch whitetail come in, and I mean, that was probably my first animal with a muzzleloader, so that was pretty cool to have that come in for your first time.
Ruined you.
It ruined me. But something I want to know too is, like, back when the first muzzleloaders you guys made, what was, like, you talk about power belt bullets, what bullets were you shooting out of those compared to what you're shooting out of the Paramounts now? I mean, that must be a huge difference.
Well, back when we first started, the common projectile was what's called a pure lead conical.
Is that just a round ball? Or?
Well, it's more the mini ball design. So it's a conically shaped bullet with a cavity in the back, and it's the same type of bullet that was shot during the Civil War. And then a new technology.
Dan, do you remember that?
That's about my time. Yeah.
So back in 1995 or so, that was about all there was. Well, immediately after that, somebody came up with the idea of using what's called a sabot in French, or we call it sabot. So the saboted bullet became popular because it had this plastic cup around the bullet itself that created a more perfect gas seal. And one of the big issues with muzzleloading rifles for ever since throughout history has been keeping that gas behind the bullet, not letting it escape around the bullet. So the problem with the saboted bullet back then is they were very difficult to load. After you had shot one bullet, you had plastic residue in there.
So you couldn't get the other one back down.
Seriously, people were having to bang their ramrod against trees to get a second load in to finish the deer off. It wasn't a good thing.
And you were shooting a smaller bullet. You were shooting a 45 caliber, 44 caliber bullet as compared to a 50. You know?
And then, you know, what happened was, again, in 2002, I said that was a watershed year. That was also when we introduced the Power Belt bullet. Now, the Power Belt bullet was invented by a guy named Michael McMichael, and instead of using the saboted cup that goes all the way around the wall of the bullet, it just had a base made of plastic that attached to a full-size 50 caliber bullet.
So it didn't burn as much.
Exactly. And so immediately we realized the superiority of that. It was just as accurate as the sabots. And it was much easier to load. So we solved the major problem people had, which was difficulty of loading. So you could shoot 5, 10 of the Power Belt bullets without ever having to clean the barrel. And what that partnership with Power Belt still remains today. And what's happened is we've just, with Michael McMichael's company, has kept developing the technical aspects of the Power Belt design, to where we've gone through all these different styles of power belts. So we have them now that are really designed for every type of situation. So whatever game you're hunting, there's some type of power belt you can use it for. So we've, some people in our company have killed everything from prairie dogs to elephants with power belt bullets.
It's interesting. I remember Dudley and I having the conversation. I don't know if you remember this or not, but this goes way back before we sold bullets. And you and I had talked, you know, do you think we could sell bullets? Yeah, I think we could sell some bullets. I mean, we're selling, look at the muzzle loaders we're selling, right? We can sell some bullets. And what was the original name of Power Belt?
Black Belt.
Black Belt. And I was actually sitting in the office of Jay Sporting Goods, with J.J. Poet.
Yep.
And he showed me a tube of Black Belt bullets. I said, well, that's an interesting looking bullet, you know. I sent them to Dudley, right? And that's kind of how that originated. And they had been researching and looking at all this different stuff and what we wanted to bring out for a bullet, because, again, at the time, you know, who are we to, you know, against all the bullets that are out there? How are you going to come out with a bullet and compete? So, but this was so different. We thought, well, so anyway, they took it and they experimented with it.
And Michael McMichael had been trying to launch the Black Belt bullet on his own, was driving around in some beat up old Gremlin or something.
A Geometra.
A Geometra. Selling bullets out of the trunk of his car.
One at a time.
Which the springs were just mashed down in that.
He would leave Idaho and it would look like it was jacked up in the front. And so I met Michael, and we started talking, and we hit it off right away. And we said, I told Michael, I said, look, we sell more muzzleloaders than just about anybody. We think your bullets are the best bullets for our guns. Why don't we form a partnership? Mm-hmm. And you only make these bullets for us, and we'll only sell bullets that you make for us.
Yep.
At the time that I made the phone call that sealed that deal, Michael was hanging sheetrock in a house, and it was 15 degrees in Idaho. And he always says, I'll remember that forever, because that took me out of the construction business and into the bullet business and made me who I am today.
And the biggest mistake Dudley and Dan ever made was we didn't buy the company.
That's right. As it turned out, that first order that we made, which we thought was just a tremendous investment, we ended up doing more bullets in a week than what that first 5 years later. We were doing more volume in a week than our entire first stocking order of those bullets.
Yep.
And it became the number one selling muzzleloading projectile in the country and remains so today.
It was a bullet that was and I think Dudley mentioned it earlier, that the sabots extremely hard to load, right? Whether it's the first bullet or the last, they're hard to put down the barrel. And with these bullets, you could take anybody, and I'd go up go to the ranges, and you'd take a guy, you'd watch him load his bullets, and then you'd take a power belt over to him and said, hey, slip this one in, right? And then he would take our bullet, and of course it would go right straight down the barrel, super easy, like it was in grease. Mm-hmm. Compared to his. I mean, it was a no-brainer.
Yep.
They'd buy him instantly.
Yep.
And that, whether the bullet was super accurate or not, which it was, but it was so dang easy to load. That's what sold that bullet.
And we had some pretty basic advertising campaigns back then. Yeah. And I remember one of the first ones that we had was Power Belt Bullets loads faster than a fat baby's diaper.
Now, I was thinking about this, but for those of you who are listening, I like to research a lot on the marketing, and we look at a lot of these avenues. And one of the things that I know, Dudley, we talked about for years is you kept it the Power Belt name instead of making it a CVA bullet.
Exactly.
Because these bullets would shoot in any muzzleloader,
right.
But they're with the general consumer, if they saw, oh, this is a CVA
right.
bullet, is it going to work in my Thompson Center? Is it going to work in my Knight?
Exactly. And we knew that if we branded it CVA, people would think that it was only for CVA. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want it to be that. We wanted to appeal to as many shooters as we could. So if they bought a Knight or a TC, we wanted them to still shoot Power Belt bullets. And so that was our first venture into multi-brand marketing. So at the time, the only brand we had was CVA, and then Power Belt became a standalone brand, owned by the same company but different brands. Mm-hmm. And the reason you do the different brands is so that you can appeal to multiple segments of the market. And so that just kept evolving and ended up to where we now have Bergara and Quake and Durasight.
And the Quake, I got to be there with the Quake deal too. It's like I'm aging myself with you two old guys here, but one of the things that I remember about that going down to Belgrade, Montana was CVA was always about added value. Mm-hmm. And so you said, you know what, we need to ship these guns with a sling. And so you found one of the best slings out there, and you started putting Quake, and you're like, well, we can sell these slings, so why don't we just buy the company?
Right. Well, we were buying slings from Quake to include with our guns.
Yep.
And that made our rifles stand apart from everything else in that, hey, you bought the rifle, but you also got this really nice sling with it. Well, we ended up being Quake's #1 customer by far. And so when the owners of Quake came to us and said they were ready to sell, we decided this would be a good brand for us to have. Yep. And we'll be able to expand it. At the time, their retail placement was really just in a lot of very small shops. Mm-hmm. Today, again, like with the Bergara rifles, CVA rifles, every major firearms hunting retailer in the country, you'll find Quake slings.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And then add more value. You found that in most states, all except a handful of them, people were putting scopes on their gun. So it made sense to put a ring and a base on there. So you came out with Duracite that allowed you to include that on those just to make more value.
Yeah, they were going to buy it anyway.
Well,
So
exactly right. So here what we were doing is we had the CVA rifle, and then the stuff that came with it, which added value, were also our brands. So by including those Duracite scope bases, scope rings, the Quake sling, including a pack of power belt bullets with the gun, we were adding value to the CVA rifle and promoting our brands, other brands that people could use with any rifle at the same time.
Right.
And I thought you got very creative too. I know now we have scope packages with Conus, which is an OEM supplier. They're their own brand, but you want to make it easy for the retailer. And so back when you were CEO, you guys came up with the idea to do a whole scope package where you had the gun, the rings, the bases, the scope, the sling, and a case, and a packable, and it shipped all together. So the retail counter guys weren't tying up time mounting scopes and putting rings and bases on, and it made it easy for them.
Well, and that's a big thing. I mean, you make things easy for the consumer. You make things easy for the retailer. If you do that, they're going to gravitate towards your brand. The salesman on the floor at the big retailer, he wants to get the gun sold, go help the next customer. If he doesn't have to spend his time getting a scope mounted, trying to find the rings that match, that fit the scope, if all that comes with trying to find the sling that's best for the rifle, if all that comes with the gun, then you've come over one of the main hurdles. You've made it easy for that salesperson to sell your product, and the consumer walks out ready to go.
Yep, and he's not sitting there going, "Oh no, we're out of rings and bases."
Right.
Exactly.
And I can't.
And that was a huge problem.
Yeah. I think one of the big things, and we mentioned it earlier, that set CVA apart and really launched to where they are today is when they came out with the Optima and the Optima Pro.
Yep.
Those guns, because it's such a competitive market, and there's basically was 3 brands in it. There were other ones, but there was basically 3 brands competing for the consumer. But when we came out with the Optima and the Optima Pro, then it was such an accurate gun and such an easy gun to shoot and load and all those sort of things, and it was a good looking gun. It set us apart, and it was no longer you were competing, you go into a distributor to sell them your brand. They had to have the Optima.
Yes.
It wasn't a question if you're going to buy it. It was how many you're going to buy, because the consumer demand was there. They came in asking no longer for, I want to buy a muzzleloader, I want to buy an Optima. And that really, for a rep, it was exciting because you no longer had to compete on just price. You know, when you compete on price, it's a race to the bottom, right? Somebody's going to get hurt at the end. And eventually that happened to a couple brands, right? So, but it really set CVA apart because it was such a great gun. It continues to be a great gun today.
Yeah, as I said before, that was the watershed moment that really made our entire company.
Made it.
Because the year we introduced the Optima, our gun sales doubled.
Yeah.
Because we had something that was unique in the market.
Yeah, you could
and
not get
everybody wanted it. And we had no idea where the top was. So we didn't know we didn't know if we'd double again the next year. We didn't know how far it would go. And that was one of the main reasons that we made the barrel factory, that we developed the barrel factory, was because we couldn't get enough barrels to put on all the Optimas that we were making.
Right.
So we knew that to control our own destiny, we had to make our own barrels. And that ended up, now if you talk about what's our core competency at BPI, it's barrel making.
Barrels.
And that move to make our own barrels for the CVA rifles was what made it possible for BPI to be able to grow to the level that it's at today.
You know, and I got thinking about that because for those folks that don't know it, BPI is now owned by a company out of Spain, Mondragon, and it's part of that company. And I remember going over there with you, Dudley, and touring the facilities and the factories, and the great Spanish people, Juan Garcia, Esther over there, and speaking with them, spending time with them, and they understand the importance, and we work together on that and to develop these brands. I think one of the big things you're talking about, the Optima, is when we changed the breech plug.
Right.
And made it easy to remove. Yeah. It has a quick removable breech plug that didn't require tools.
Well, that's another one of those disruptive innovations, and there have been a series of them. So the inline rifle was a major disruptive innovation. The brake action was a disruptive innovation. Two of the biggest problems that people had with muzzleloaders was stuck breech plugs.
Yep.
And rust in the barrel. Because as you recall, back in the day when we were shooting blued barrels, you better be cleaning that gun when you got home from the hunt that day, or the next day it was going to be all rusted up.
Yep.
Well, we solved that problem with the nitride process. So, now
nitroferric carbonization.
There you go. And so that made the exterior surfaces of the barrel so hard that rust couldn't penetrate it. So that solved one of your major problems. And then the quick release breech plug that you're talking about, which was made in a way that it would completely seal any gas from getting back into the threads of the breech plug. You now had a breech plug that probably it used to require a wrench. Well, it did require a wrench to get the breech plug out.
Sure.
Because that fouling would come back into the threads. Well, by sealing those threads off, we had a breech plug that we could take out with our fingers, right, even after shooting the gun several times. So that you look at what those two, all these innovations did. They made muzzleloaders easier to use for the consumer.
Yeah.
Sure.
And here were these great seasons sitting out there. In Colorado, you've got a rut elk season.
Yeah.
All over the country, in most states, the muzzleloader season is during the rut. And so people wanted to take advantage of that hunting opportunity, and now they had a gun that they felt confident using.
Right.
As opposed to something that was like a mystery to them. And that's what muzzleloaders really were initially. I mean, and you can look at it sort of like the same thing that happened when the compound bow was introduced. The only people that were into archery back in the day before compound bows were very, very serious enthusiasts, because you really had to know what you were doing.
Right.
The compound bow made archery accessible to the common man.
Even though you still don't use one.
I am sort of a traditionalist.
I mean, you innovate with muzzleloaders, but you stay with the long bow.
Hey, I still like to shoot a flintlock too. I like it all. Good point.
And Wyatt knows this from helping pack out several of Dudley's elk over the last few years. And I will give this to Dudley. Dudley is a traditional bow hunter, shoots a long bow, and shoots it very well. And he's done some DIY public land. He's taken a couple bulls, a real nice 6-point, another bow a couple years ago. And Wyatt's always been around unless he's team roping.
Wyatt's been part of the Shearer Elk Uber service. So I could go off hunting around here, and if I happened to shoot anything, I would just get to where I could get a cell phone reception and call, and they'd be on the way with the horses.
Yeah,
A lot
So
easier.
that's another one of Chad's businesses, by the way, is the Elk Uber service.
Well, anything for Dudley, but I think it's cool is Walker and Wyatt have grown up around you guys. And Wyatt, tell me what it was like. Just, you never really realized who you were hanging out with in hunting camp, and some of the times you get to be up there with them and pack stuff out.
I think one of the first memories with both of you guys was like bird hunting. And like even when you guys come out when we're little and didn't really do much, you just take us and let us come with you. And that, back when we were kids, that was a lot of fun.
I liked you a lot better when you didn't carry a gun. I got to shoot a lot more, so you don't miss much. So.
And back then, I mean, I took a shotgun and had 5 shots in it. So
Yeah, exactly.
I tended to shoot a lot. No matter how far it was getting shot at.
Well, you never shot just once.
Yeah, the ammo companies love you.
I probably made them very big companies.
Dudley and Dan would be there with their side-by-sides.
Yeah.
And you'd be out there, and Wyatt would be there with his Winchester SX3 at the time with 5 shots in it.
One of my fondest early memories with the Shearer family, Chad, was when all you guys came down, and my Brittany had puppies. and you wanted to get a puppy for the boys, and you guys came down to my place in Georgia, and you all picked out your new little pup.
Yep.
Gage
Yep.
was his name, and he was sort of the childhood dog for you and Walker.
That was the world's biggest Brittany.
And I mean, that dog was so spoiled. You know, Walker's got all of his dogs out in the kennel now. I don't think Gage ever stayed in a kennel.
No.
He had his little log bed with his own mattress upstairs.
He did. He was a great dog, and really that got Walker into the bird dogs and being around. And both of you had great bird dogs, and you'd bring them up to Montana, and
Sure.
we'd hunt with them, and so many fond memories with that. And I still remember Walker and Wyatt just pushing brush and hanging
Sure.
around, and
Having
then when
fun.
they got old enough to hunt birds. So
Yeah, you know, one thing I just want to mention at this point, Chad, you know, any young people that are out there listening to this, you really can work in something that you love to do.
Mhm.
And I would highly recommend to any young people that, you know, hey, take that step.
Yeah.
You don't have to sit in a cubicle every day. There's it with if you like athletics, if you like camping, if you know anything outdoors, there's industries behind that.
Yes.
Sure.
And there's places for people to work in those industries. And when you can work in something that you love to do, it's not like work.
yeah,
That's right.
And Dan and I were talking about this just the other day. We think about all the great experiences that we've had, all the people we've met, the places all over the world that we've been,
Yep.
all while getting to be in the hunting industry.
yep.
And I can't imagine. I couldn't have imagined 28 years ago when I started
Yep.
with this little company called CVA, that it would lead to the rich life and professional career that I've had over these years.
Sure.
So, you know, you young folks out there, don't think that it's impossible. Now, you may have to start at the bottom.
Yep.
And you're going to have to work your way up and learn things. And it may not be the highest salary you can get right out of college or right out of high school. But if you get in there and you put the work in and you love what you're doing,
Yep.
you can have that kind of satisfying career.
Yeah, I heard one guy say you'll never work a day in your life if you love your job.
And that's
Exactly.
very true.
Yep, and I've loved it. I've been fortunate what I've done. We fast forward today. Dudley, you put a lot of people in place. Nate Treadaway was the CEO after you, and he did a fantastic job.
Yes, he
and
did.
now he's moved on to another company that his family was involved in, and that's been exciting and still a great friend of ours. And now we have Scott Fisher in, who's the new CEO of BPI,
Right.
and doing a great job with that.
Yeah, and Scott came from FN, which is one of the biggest military arms makers in the world,
Right.
and is an expert at operations management and understands the ins and outs of not just how to use firearms, but how firearms are built with today's modern machine tools. So he brought a lot to the table for our company, things that we needed.
Yep.
And so, you know, we're just really, really well positioned to continue this growth curve into the future.
That's exactly right. And to see all these brands come together and watch them from their infancy stages all the way up, it's been real. Why you've grown up with it, you've seen it firsthand.
Something I want to know too is, Mr. Dan, what other brands did you market? I mean, and sell for? Because I know
I worked
CVA,
for Smith & Wesson for 10 years and Colt, Under Armour. We were the first manufacturing rep group that was hired by Under Armour in its infancy. And, you know, did obviously a tremendous brand, still remains a tremendous brand today. But Tasco Optics early in the day, I represented those guys for a lot of years. But yeah, I had a lot of really great opportunities with a lot of great brands. And to Dudley's point, there is a lot of opportunity if you love the outdoors. I mean, I started at retail. Right, I was a retail clerk and loved it, and was hired by a manufacturer's rep agency, and you know that's how I got started. You know, so there is a tremendous opportunity if you love it, get in it. So everybody's got to do something. You might as well do something you like.
Yeah.
So
I would say the culmination of our time together, Dan, so far, had to have been the Cape Buffalo hunt that we went on a few years ago with muzzle loaders.
Yeah.
And so, Dan and I are big muzzleloader guys, and we thought, wouldn't it be cool to shoot a Cape Buffalo with a muzzleloader? So over there we went.
That was a dumb idea, by the way. But
I did it in Zimbabwe before you guys, and so I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. So.
I thought at my age, what's the difference?
That was a hunt I'll always remember. And
It is
you will.
Oh, it was a fabulous hunt. It was the best hunt I had ever been on. And anybody that loves to hunt, if you can do it, if you can get to Africa, there's nothing
Especially
like it.
free range Africa.
Free range, exactly
and
right.
Chad just went on the same hunt just last year.
Yeah.
Mozambique. We were trying some new Bergaras out, and the new Canyon rifle, and I'm telling you what, in 375, it's amazing. And when you're carrying that gun, we were walking 8 to 10 miles a day, and you're like, man, that's a lightweight gun over there, and I was glad we had it. It was good. So, do you have any more questions for these guys?
I mean, any funny hunting stories or stuff? I'm sure you guys have some of each other. We got to end this funny so people can get a laugh out of it.
I don't think we really want to go there.
I know some, but I didn't know if you have any favorites.
Well, I was known by the Shearer family as the rock shooter for a number of years.
The rock shooter.
The rock shooter.
Have I heard this story?
And back when I first started bow hunting with Chad, killing an elk with a bow was my nemesis. And whenever I would see an elk, I would just freak out and start shaking.
Here is this cool, calm, and collective CEO, and when the elk was there, he was into Jello mode.
Oh yeah. And Chad had a fellow that worked for him named Jed, and I was hunting with Jed one day, and we spotted these elk, a monster bull with a herd over on a mountain. We climbed up the backside of the mountain in the snow, swam down through the snow, got within 60 yards of these bedded elk. I'm set up. Jed blows his cow call once, and this big bull gets up and walks past me at 10 yards, and I shot under it because I came to about a 3-inch draw. And after that hunt, Jed went to Chad and said, I can't take it anymore. This guy's broken me. And he hasn't guided since.
He retired
And that elk that I shot under it would have been the biggest elk killed with a bow in Montana that year. And I missed it at 10 yards. So, but hey, anybody that's hunted a lot, it's not always success. And, that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it rewarding when you are successful. Yeah. When you can overcome those nerves finally, and be successful, it makes it all worth it. So, I think back on that. What if I had killed that elk? Well, I don't think the last one that I shot or the last couple would have meant as much to me if I hadn't been through all those trials and tribulations with it. Yeah. That being said, I've never taken up golf because I don't need any more frustration in my life.
I'll tell you, the fine staff at BPI were so kind to him at Christmas that year. They took a rock, drilled a hole in it, and took one of his arrows and presented it to him for his trophy that's on his mantle.
I still have that on the mantle.
Nice.
The rock with the broadhead going all the way through it.
Yeah.
Or so it appears.
But I think of that, Dudley, and I was fortunate to guide you and guide you on elk, and we had a lot of fun together. But what I think is so cool is you could go do the guided hunts, and you still do some of those, but you said, I want to do it on my own. And this is a guy right now that doesn't have to, but he'll pack in 6 miles with a day camp, and he'll spend 4 or 5 days straight in there, and he succeeded. And I think that is really cool with a longbow that you have that passion, and it's always fun for us, and I know our boys have watched that.
What percent of Montana people kill an elk with a bow?
I don't know currently. It was at 7%, and then I heard it went down to 4%. So
yeah, but with a longbow.
I mean, that's compounding.
That's all bows. So I don't even know, but there's some great archers out there, and it's just neat to see that enthusiasm.
And with muzzle loading, it's a step in that direction. I know a lot of people that they don't, that they're so dedicated to their muzzle loading that they don't hunt with a centerfire rifle.
Yep.
Now, I'm not recommending that because I like to sell centerfire rifles too.
Yeah.
But, as you become more experienced as a hunter, you look, how can I inject more challenge into this? Yeah. How can I make my next success even more satisfying than the last? Yeah. And that might be the size animal that you're hunting, that you start to limit yourself to trophies. It might be the type of animal that you hunt. There's a lot of game that's more difficult, but you look at these people that are sheep freaks, and boy, they go through some torture, and they spend a lot of money, but they do it because of the challenge. And whether it's with a rifle, with a bow, whatever, everybody's always looking to raise that level. And the level doesn't have to just be raised by going to Africa and shooting Cape buffalo. You can do it by hunting the game that you hunt, but hunting it in a harder way.
And it doesn't have to be a 12-point buck or whatever. If you do it the traditional way, but be it a muzzle loader or a longbow, or make it a little bit tougher on yourself, right? It's just more challenging and more satisfying.
Well, and I think we'll see a lot of people that are, you see people that are still traditionalists, and sure, they can go out and kill a deer pretty easily with a centerfire rifle with a modern muzzle loader, but going out and shooting one with that flintlock, you do that too, and it adds a whole new wrinkle to the sport. It keeps it exciting for you.
Over the years, I got to hunt with some really cool people, such as you guys. And when I was a rookie guide, my first year guide, I got to spend the day with Jack Atchison Sr., who was booking agent, well-known, hunted all over the world, one of the best elk hunters I ever spent any time with. And as we're sitting there, I'm 21 years old, and I have no idea really who I'm hunting with. I had a little bit, but no idea. And Jack and I are sitting on this mountain, and it's snowing, and it's cold, and we were looking at elk sign. And he said, Chad, I want to give you one piece of advice. He said, I book guys on hunts all over the world, to Kyrgyzstan for Marco Polo and all these hunts. He said, I want to tell you, hunt while you're physically able and do as many hunts as you can, because as you get older, you'll have the money, but you won't be able to climb the mountains.
That's right.
And that was something that inspired me to try and, as a young person, to try and do as many hunts as I could do that and script and say, I remember I put in for a bighorn sheep tag when I was 18 because I wanted to shoot a bighorn so bad, and I knew I wasn't going to draw a ram tag, and they had some management tag, so I got the bighorn sheep hunt, and it was a cool hunt. Did I get a big ram? No, I shot a ewe, but I was still out there and experiencing that, and I think that is what you guys are talking about, is get out there and do that.
Exactly.
Do it.
Well, Wyatt, you got any other?
I think that's about it.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed episode 3 of Beyond the Big Sky. And thank you, Dudley and Dan, for being a part of this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Well, you guys have been friends for years, and hope you guys have some more success catching some trout in Montana. I know Walker's going to get you out there and spend some time with you, and we've done that. And if you get those trout that are too big, Wyatt will come with the horses and help you out.
We can pack it out. We'll call it Fish Uber.
Perfect.